Good morning and welcome to the special council meeting for November 28th. I call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. I would like a motion, please, to adopt the agenda. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council adopt the special council meeting agenda for Thursday, November 28th, 2024 at 9 a.m.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. We'll move forward then to item 2, the special council meeting business, consideration of the 2025 operating and capital budgets, and I will turn this over to CAO Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Good morning, everyone. So, like we did on Monday, I will start with about 10 minutes of opening salvo for this operating budget presentation. Some of the information will be similar to what you've seen, so I won't spend much time restating what I already stated. There is Sheena's agenda for today. She will be the carrying most of the weight for the day, so expect great things. As mentioned, we're in day 2 of what we're hoping is 4 days of budget deliberations. After today, on December 2nd, with what direction we received on Monday and what we get today, we will bring forward, hopefully, proposed final budget for discussion at committee of the whole, along with any outstanding items there might be. The Operations Center renovation, for example, that capital item, that will be presented on December 2nd. So that certainly is one on the list. And December 9th, hopefully we can get that final budget passed. Mentioned Monday, 3 themes for this budget administration prepared based on: infrastructure renewal, service level optimization, economic growth. Operating has a much more direct link to those 3 things as it does to council strategic plan. Capital largely focused on goal number 4, the fiscal practices goal. Today certainly touches on that as well as heavily on number 1 and number 2. To go through this again, but in a different way, financial challenges, similar to what you've seen on Monday. The inflation and carbon tax side of things, we will talk a bit more about that than we did on Monday, but certainly when it comes to the 2020 to 2024, we can't understate the impact that inflation has had on our core operating costs, fuel, contracted services, materials being common ones, where even though this year we're projected an overall CPI rate of 2.8% right now, that is household CPI. The town does not buy a lot of loaves of bread or groceries, for example, but when you look at fuel, materials, construction services, those are trending in the double digits. Asphalt and concrete, on the other hand, when you look on a 4-year trajectory, those are in the triple-digit increases, and that has put a lot of pressure on our ability to maintain our infrastructure and to keep costs controlled. Sundial, as mentioned, now we're understanding the broader franchise fees impact of that closure. $750,000 is our current estimate. Not an easy thing for the town to absorb, but I believe we have done as well as we possibly could have absorbing the closure, a short notice closure of our largest taxpayer and largest franchise fee contributor. OFL, that will be unpacked as the spring goes on. Unfunded capital replacement, as we have discussed both on Monday and in the past, that we don't have a strong reserve building system in place to start to renew those core assets, facilities, equipment, fleet, and IT, just being some examples. Then water loss and I&I. For the last decade, our loss between the two, unbilled loss, I should mention, between $1 million and $2 million annually. And to diverge from my general knack for pessimism, I want to talk a little bit about optimism and why there is some light here. Now, when you look at this slide, you don't see the light, that's for sure. This is our water and wastewater loss with 2024 updated year to date. percentages since 2014. The last 10 years, as you can see, with few aberrations, we're averaging in the 30 percentile and the 40 percentile, respectively, for water and wastewater, millions of dollars annually. But when we unpack 2024, you see we had a rough start to the year, 2 quarters, in fact, into Q3. But as we began the bulk of our, what's now 25, 20 to 27 perhaps, water repairs and our sanitary repairs, relining programs, we're seeing not just the percentages drop, but since we track daily the volume of water leaving our reservoirs and the volume of wastewater leaving the regional lift station, those total volumes, cubic meter volumes, are decreasing. And September, October, and Adrian can speak further later, into November, those daily volumes are translating into percentage loss volumes, decreasing month over month. So we won't present council with a snapshot, I guess, or a assessment probably until we get through spring 2025, because that is our highest rain volume infiltration. But I'm happy to report, based on the excellent work that Director Pedro and his team have been doing the last year, we are starting to see results of this effort. It's going to take time, but even right now they continue to work on significant leaks. It's just not as easy as finding a leak. You have to find the source of the leak. Those are two very different activities, and time and patience, but it's good to see. Another thing, housing starts. If you look at this, another 8-year snapshot, almost 9-year snapshot. 2023, I did report that 2024 is expected to be comparable. I was incorrect. You see, in 2024 to date, we have 120 housing starts, which is cumulative of our previous 5 years, at least, together. 70 of those units come from an apartment building that has not yet broken ground yet, but we expect to in early spring. But even with those 70 units excluded, the fact that our single detached, our duplexes, our secondary suites are over 50 at the moment. And we still have more permits in the queue to be approved. So we're projecting 123 to 125, I believe was the number. That is progress in itself. The town needs more housing. You can see from the inflation numbers you're about to be presented today in our assessment base for residential. You can see it in the inventory on realtor.ca. You can see it for what some houses are selling for that may have just hit the market 12 to 36 months ago. So it's positive to see both the market activity responding into that need, and it's certainly due to council's recognition of that need as well, with your land use bylaw amendments, the various efforts, both administratively and governance-wise, we've all been making to try to encourage responsible development here. And housing starts relate eventually to commercial and industrial assessment too. So that is positive. And we have much more in the queue for 2025. Asset management, the term that is often said, but never quite totally grasped. Progress here from our citywide and GIS software that's now implemented near full. Our TCA listing, which was long neglected, is getting updated and corrected. Engineering standards have been updated. Our development agreement review is underway, connecting those engineering standards to what we actually want developers to accomplish. Capital planning, as the motion on Monday read, those are already underway, will be delivered in the new year. Our asset management coordinator has now been onboarded and is working diligently on getting our program started. And the overall culture and focus of the organization has confidently shifted to understanding that this has to be our #1 priority. I think that is something that's difficult to quantify, but if I had to qualify it, that is one of the best accomplishments this administration has had in getting staff to understand that we have priorities, but this is number one. We have to fix our infrastructure. We have to fix what we have before we look at building more or before we look at doing anything of note, of importance going forward. So those three things are cause for not celebration, but I think optimism. Now, again, it's going to take several years to see the effects of what we're doing here in terms of revenue growth and activity, but you have to start somewhere, and if there are indicators that denote those upcoming successes, I think these are those, and we'll continue to report to council throughout 2025 and into the next council term on how these things are progressing. So with that note, it is now Director Lindemann's turn to give us all the great things about Budget 2025 operating.
Thank you. So before we get into 2025 budget operating, we are going to do a 2024 year-end review, and I am going to pass it back to CAO to update us on council.
Oh, you want me to do this one too? Okay. Hi again. I'm Brent. Nice to see you all.
Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. So just a few quick highlights from 2024, in case we all forgot, but a busy year. It's still not over. It's remarkable it's still not over, but it's still not over. So council, our remuneration review and the restructuring of your salary model, which formally kicks off January 1st. That was no small feat. Your ad hoc committees to review bylaws, which I believe the last one is due to report sometime soon, the procedural ad hoc committee. ICC renegotiations were positive, if not, albeit a little slow this year, but progressing well. Next meeting next week, expected to wrap up in early 2025. Provincial advocacy, certainly that was with the infrastructure, environmental, and internet-related issues. Fall 2024 was active for council on that front, and Olds Fiber Limited, which took up a significant amount of time this year, was brought to a close earlier this month. I believe this next one's also mine, so I might as well do that one as well. My office, respectively, even though we work obviously closely with the council on what I just listed, economic development has had a very busy 2024 and into 2026 with the NGEI initiative. Housing and commercial development, that has been huge on my radar as well. And having successes, just reported on that, and we will report to council in closed session on December 2nd to give you a better view of the more specific projects we have been working on and some opportunities we see coming our way. Engagement across the board, whether it be our service clubs or Olds College, or with what we're trying to do at the old fire hall, that again, it is between my department and community services that we do run the bulk of engagement. Mountain View Power, we will report on that in Q1 during my OCAO update, but that is going very well. Partnerships established with several local minor sports clubs, hoping to get more on board to help us spread the good word and sell the good power. And the policy and bylaw review framework. We are on track to have all policies reviewed by the end of council's term. I would say by summer 2025 is our shoot goal to have everything reviewed. And bylaws, we will have those core governance bylaws, code of conduct, remuneration, and the procedural bylaw, obviously reviewed by then as well. And next up, I'll do this one as well. No, I'm joking.
CEO Williams, perhaps maybe you would like to explain what the NGEI acronym means for our viewing audience?
Yeah, NGEI is the Next Generation Economy Initiative, which is a fancy way of saying our economic development strategy. Just a whole lot within that scope. You may see other acronyms such as BROOD or RBSN. They all fit in their own way, and yeah, investolds.ca.
All right, so corporate services. In Budget 2024, we made changes to the corporate services division, reconfiguring 2 positions into our corporate services admin assistant. Ali Watt was hired for this position and has fit in seamlessly to our department. She's the face you'll see when you walk into the town of Olds. Over the summer months, we've implemented both Questica budgeting software and Citywide Maintenance Manager. The 2025 operating budget that you'll be seeing today was created using the new Questica budgeting system. This system has made access to information so much easier for all directors and managers. While we're still working out some of the process kinks and new reports, as is expected, this software has definitely made a significant impact on how we interact with the budget and our year-to-date spending. In May, we welcomed our municipal administration intern, Vanessa. Vanessa has, over the last few months, worked closely with the CAO on a couple housing projects, Director Pedro on our GIS implementation, and with our communications department on some arts and culture projects. She's been a great asset to our department and to the town. In utilities, we've continued our e-billing push by changing things up a bit and offering some incentives. Over the last 3 months, anyone who is registered on e-billing was entered into a draw to win a month of free utilities, up to $150. Since this incentive started 3 months ago, we've seen a 2% increase in our e-billing, and we're up to 54% now. Moving on to IT, Carolyn, our IT coordinator, has been very busy over the last few months with a couple of large projects. We've continued our transition from on-prem to cloud storage with our move to SharePoint. We've implemented a multi-factor authentication, which has increased security to our network system. We're currently in the process of transitioning from our on-prem phone system to a soft phone system. So our current phone system is outdated and we continue to lose features as we're unable to upgrade it. This means we'll be using Microsoft Teams now to handle all our calls, all our numbers, so it'll all be the same phone numbers are going to be ported into Teams, and calls will be sent and received from our computers. And lastly, the Patch. This is our new intranet system. This is a site that has been created within SharePoint for Town of Old staff to easily access information that is meant for everyone. So this is stuff such as bylaws, forms, templates, minutes, safety information. Just creates a hub that's easily accessible for information for all of our staff in one spot. Yes, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Director Linderman. Just a quick question on our e-bill incentives, and we're up 54%. What are we doing with the bills, though, now due to the postal strike? And have I missed something? I apologize if I've missed something on social media.
No, so we did post on social media, of course, about the postal strike. Once we are ready to issue December bills, or I guess, yeah, November bills in December, we will post again, just, we're hoping by then the strike is over, but if it is not, that residents can call, we will print bills out if they need, give amounts over the phone kind of thing. Unfortunately, there's not much else we can do. Yeah.
Supplemental, so then we'll also include that in our newspaper ad?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I didn't pay attention last time, so I apologize if it was there.
All right, so next up we have infrastructure and planning for a 2024 year in review.
Good morning, everyone. So we have been quite busy, water loss and I being the largest one there, and as the CAO alluded to, we've made some grounds, and we've identified quite a few areas recently which we think will move the needle even further. The water meter pilot program, that is an ongoing analysis. It has proven effective for us, which is why in our budget discussions we are proposing proceeding with full-scale implementation starting next year. The sewer main CCTV inspection program, again, this has been a huge initiative for us, both to identify the current defects in our system as well as identifying sources of inflow or infiltration. And so that certainly hits us on the water leak side as well as the the sanitary volumes there. So that has been very good for us. Winter maintenance service level revisions. We have implemented those changes to our policy and procedure, and they are currently in practice. They have received mixed reviews, of course, but we will continue on and smooth out those kinks as we move forward. MIP program completion, so this is 52nd Street in Uptown. We are finally at the point where that program is fully complete. There was some outstanding deficiencies earlier in the fall here, but those have been rectified, and it's fully complete, and inspections have been completed on it. Citywide maintenance manager implementation. So as Director Linderman alluded to earlier, that has been ongoing. We continue to expand the amount of information that we are using that system for. Initially, we started just with the service request and work order parts of that program, but we are now starting to integrate all of our inspections through that process, as well as tracking worker time there as well. It's fairly easy for them to do, so the more that we integrate, the more information that we have on hand to make decisions on. So the team has been fantastic in adopting all of that program there. So we will continue to expand the maintenance manager as well as citywide in general as we move forward. The in-house GIS transition, that has gone fairly well. I can't speak enough about how nice it is to have our own internal GIS control. Of course, you need the expertise and the manpower to do so, but between a couple of us in the office, I think we're managing it quite well. So it has been very important to us in the asset management program in general, because you need to have that GIS backend information up to date so that we can integrate it with the asset management part of that program. So that has been great. Road repair program, we completed, as council is aware, many locations around town, both from large pavement patches to 30-something utility digs. So it's looking fairly good. Home composter and rain barrel program, those have been quite well received. I think we're at a few $1,000s for each program respectively. So I think that's probably something we do want to continue on the environmental incentive front. And then the branch dump pilot project, that one was, I would say, relatively successful. I think it does warrant a look at in 2025 to see if we want to continue with that program and perhaps make some adjustments to the hours and or what's accepted at that facility. So something we will certainly discuss in the new year. Thank you.
Next, we have Director Lapointe with Community Services update.
Thank you. So Parks Naturalization Review, the park staff are developing a proposed inventory that identifies those areas best suited for naturalization starting next year. And just a reminder to council, the target is 10% or 23 acres of the current area mowed. The communications strategy development, this is going to be an internal document, an internal communication strategy and social media plan. They're in development as we speak, and those will help clarify roles, streamline activities, and optimize efficiencies as well. The men's shed engagement and proposal, I believe council received this proposal last February. It promises to revitalize the former operations shop and repurpose it to assist those experiencing social isolation, while also providing a fresh new art space for interested community members. And you should be receiving that request for decision on December 9th. The pool efficiency upgrades, you can expect the final upgrades, including the window installation and ventilation in the mechanical room, to be completed by the end of the year. Website refresh. This is ongoing work to improve the functionality of the municipal website. And you may know that the current website was using outdated technology, and so it was due to be replaced anyway. So you should see that completed early 2025. Poverty simulation happened here in October. This was a unique and powerful experience that was designed to challenge perceptions and enhance empathy. And that was a partnership that we had in place with the Central Alberta United Way that brought that forward for us. And then finally, the sports field revitalization. Rotary Park soccer field renovations were involved. That included aeration, top dressing, and overseating. There were fence repairs at OR Hedges, and Rotary Park Diamond infield shale conditioning and regrading. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question for you, Director Lapointe. The poverty simulation, do you know if there's going to be any type of follow-up at all with the group, with the town and the people that were involved?
I'm not aware at this point, although I know it was very well received. And so, again, Heather Dixon and myself will have a conversation about next steps.
Very much.
Perfect. So next we have Protective Services and Director Andrew.
Thank you. So Protective Services, a few items on the go. That the big one for municipal enforcement was the Community Standards Bylaw rework, where we were breaking it down from one large document into separate entities. That made it easier for us to navigate and for the public, and as well to update the language and standardize the structure of fines and penalties for a higher level of compliance and outcome. A capital project that was purchased early in the year was a special operations trailer, which is utilized by all of the emergency services, including RCMP, as a mobile command post and or resource gathering area for large-scale events. The good news on our rental and utilization of our fire training facility was up this year. We've had partnerships formed with other municipality fire services as well as private entities. As mentioned earlier in the week, we formed a lasting partnership with the Alberta Vehicle Extrication Training Association, and Olds is the host location for their annual symposium of 4 days, where we've seen up to 120 firefighters come for 4 days to train at our facility and stay in the community. The HVAC control upgrade to the emergency services building was completed, and that's been a long-standing issue with problems, and so that control system was installed and functioning much better than the old. The HVAC replacement plan for the RCMP building is completed this year, so we purchased and installed the last of 3 HVAC units on the roof of the RCMP detachment, which now modernizes that, and projected life cycle is 15 to 20 years for those units. And we implemented the capital purchase solar-powered radar speed signs that were part of the budget ask for last year, and they're the ones that you've seen in various locations in the community where they can be mounted permanently, but we can change that location. And we've gathered lots of excellent information from those signs about traffic patterns and speeds traveled in different locations, and helps focus our enforcement efforts with the RCMP. Not mentioned on here, some of the pieces, again, just the busyness of all of the different aspects of the department, and the deployment to Jasper for wildfire was part of the fire department piece, and that does have a financial component to it because, of course, there is costs associated with it, but it's also a revenue source that came from the provincial government for that deployment. So that is Protective Services.
Thank you. Next, we have our budget survey recap. So the 2025 budget engagement ran from May 27th to July 5th, 2024. We received 379 responses. Road maintenance and parks and recreation were marked as top priorities for our citizens. Many residents want to see more effective repairs and better road conditions, while 76% of respondents chose green spaces like trails, playgrounds, and parks as top priorities. valuing these areas for recreation and relaxation. Another key takeaway from the survey was the messaging of residents and business owners feeling that they are paying higher taxes while receiving fewer services. Public safety was a key concern for many, with calls for more visible policing and effective bylaw enforcement. There was positive feedback received on the changes implemented in 2024 to our solid waste, with 63% of respondents indicating that they are satisfied with the current service level. Affordable housing, a majority of respondents prioritized affordable housing options, wanting the town to reduce red tape and offer more incentives. 82% of respondents selected more affordable rental options when asked what type of housing is required in Olds. All right, so now we will get into our base budget. Just a reminder that the base budget is essentially what it will cost in 2025 to deliver the same levels of service that we are currently delivering in 2024. After we have gone through all the base budget, we'll introduce any service level changes being proposed as project papers. Before we get into all the numbers, I just wanted to highlight some of the pressures that we are faced with in putting together this 2025 operating budget. Much like CAO mentioned, inflation has eased compared to most recent years. But we are still seeing contracted services and core maintenance materials increasing higher than the current 3%. For example, asphalt at 10% and concrete at 30%. Carbon tax. The next carbon tax increase is slated for April 1st, 2025. This will have an approximate $21,000 additional impact on our operating budget, bringing the total carbon tax estimated on natural gas and fuel to $150,000. This does not include the indirect increases we see from many suppliers and contractors as they pass the cost of carbon tax on to their customers. Provincial funding cuts, as we all know, we've seen significant decreases to our capital funding from the province, increased policing costs, cuts to grants in place of taxes, fine revenue, and the STEP program. We've mentioned quite a few times our water loss and inflow and infiltration, which has been a priority over the last 2 budget years. While we're making headway, it will take some time to recover from the losses that we've received in the last couple of years. And of course, debt management. It will take several months before we get direction from Alberta Treasury on the status of our debt forgiveness ask. In the meantime, we'll be putting our sale proceeds into term deposits and servicing the debentures. All right, moving right into the budget. So the base budget being presented today is a balanced budget of $34,994,901. This is a total increase of $290,932 over 2024. $524,183 is the increase in our general operating or tax supported, and a decrease of $233,251 in our utilities budget. So the next few slides will look at the tax-supported portion of the budget and do not include utilities. So we'll go over utilities separately. So first we'll look at revenue as a whole, and then there are a few slides that go into detail. On the far right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the variance from 2024 to 2025. And that overall, the tax-supported revenue has increased by $524,184. Going down the list, you'll notice that property taxes has remained the same. I've not included any increase to assessment or tax rates in this base budget. If council chooses to approve additional projects, these would need to be funded through a tax revenue increase. Franchise fees are increasing by $72,000. As you know, council approved an increase to the Fortis franchise fee percentage from 17% to 20% in October. However, this will only bring a small increase to revenue due to the significant loss in consumption with the closure of Sundial. ATCO is forecasting a slight increase in consumption, thus this is the main reason for the increase in franchise fees. Sales and user fees is increasing by $107,000. Investment income is decreasing by $168,000. This is due to the write-off of the Olds Fiber receivable, and with this, we will no longer receive interest on our portion of the loan. Conditional grants are decreasing by $300,000, and other revenue is increasing by $27,000. Requisitions have increased by $305,000, meaning we'll need to collect this much more on behalf of the province and seniors housing. as well as transfers from reserve have increased 400,000. So looking at a few of those in more detail, we have our conditional grants. As mentioned, this has decreased by 300,000. Payments from Mountain View County are up slightly at 23,000. This is just in our agreements, they increased by CPI each year. 313,000 decrease within provincial grants, the largest being our Alberta Community Partnership, ACP grants that we had received in 2023 and 2024, not expected in 2025. Sales and user fees. So if we look closer, you can see that it is an increase of 107,000, primarily within fire services, cemetery, and sportsplex. These increases are being made just to bring these respective departments back in line with budgets. There are no changes expected in service. Transfers from reserves. Transfers from reserves have increased by 400,000 in 2025. This is primarily a decrease in the Destination Olds Collective Fund that was used for a 2024 project, and an increase in funds coming from our general operating for the payment of the Olds Fiber debenture. As mentioned before, funds from the sale of OFL will be transferred to reserve in 2024 and then used to offset these payments until we hear from Alberta Treasury on our asks for debt forgiveness or restructuring. Before I move on, are there any questions on expenses or revenue? Would you rather just keep going, trudge through the numbers? Okay. All right. Moving to expenses. The total tax-supported expenses are up 524,183. Running through the main function areas quickly, we'll see that salaries and wages have increased 109,000. Training, conferences, and travel are down slightly, while advertising and memberships are just up slightly. Contracted services has decreased 865,000. This is due just to a few larger projects that were budgeted in 2024 and are not in the 2025 budget. Repairs and maintenance and rentals and leases have both decreased, while insurance has been budgeted at a 10% increase. Telecommunications, community events, goods and supplies have all remained relatively the same. Utilities has increased 86,000, bringing budgets in line with actuals and increasing due to the carbon tax increases. Interest on long-term debt is up 281,000, and grants to organizations has increased 55,000. As was mentioned previously, requisitions are up 305,000. This is an increase of 277,422 from the province for the education tax, and an increase of 27,889 from Mountain View Seniors Housing. There's a transfer to capital from operating, budgeted of 43,000. This is the two pieces of equipment for fire that were proposed on Monday, and 2,500 from cemetery for the columbarium pathway. All right, getting into a little bit of the details on these. I think if we just go up slightly to the salaries, wages, and benefits. Sorry. Page 29. One more. There you go. Sorry, I was ripping through all that. So the salaries, wages, and benefits, you'll see on this slide, has increased 295,000. This includes all employee step movements within the pay grid. And then with the move to Questica, we're now able to accurately budget for benefits by employee. So every single benefit that we have gets put on each employee. So there's been a significant increase in the dollar value of benefits. There were no positions added to this budget, or COLA is not included. So this is purely just the step movements and benefits. You may have noticed, I'm sure Councillor Wilson noticed, on the previous slide that I had said 190,000 for salary increase. I've applied a vacancy allowance to the salaries as a whole, knowing that in any given year that we will have vacancies throughout the year. Moving on to training, conferences, and travel. This has decreased by 29,000 in our base budget. Administration has implemented an employee development plan. This will allow for more consistent, predictable budgeting within this area moving forward. Moving on to repairs and maintenance. We have decreased overall by 44,000, and this was just a 2024 project specific for trails repairs and maintenance that has been removed. You'll see in the projects being proposed today, though, that administration is asking for this item to be included in the base budget moving forward. If we look at our utilities, meaning electricity, natural gas, and wastewater, we're anticipating an increase of 86,000. A decrease has been budgeted within finance to reflect the administration building moving over to the ops center, but significant increases can be seen to streetlights and the aquatic center, just based on 2024 year-to-date actuals and bringing them in line. Grants and payments to other organizations. This has increased by 55,000. This is indicative of the Olds Municipal Library increase and a change in reporting of Mountain View Power grants. So it does show on here that Mountain View Power has increased 36,900 in grants. However, that's not the case. It's just a reporting change in the object area that is being reported. Debt servicing. So debt servicing has increased by 653,861. This is the OFL debenture payment now being recorded within the Town of Olds budget. And transfer to reserves. This has decreased by 52,000, and that is the election. With the election being held in 2025, we will not be transferring any amount to reserves. And there is no budgeted transfer from Mountain View Power to reserves in 2025. All right, so that is the tax-supported portion of our budget. We can move on to utilities now, if there's no questions on any of that. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering about the Mountain View Power. So we have those prudentials, correct? Is that reflected in that? Like, do we transfer that to anywhere to put that money aside? Is that part of a reserve or not? Or is that just something we just
It's so
balance through?
Prudential is a cash deposit account essentially that is given to UtilityNet. We do have reserves though that are backing that deposit account essentially.
So reflected in this document here, I'm not seeing a breakout of where our franchise fees go to, and I'm just wondering if we can see that at all. I know that we pay for certain things out of the franchise fees, and it would be good to see where that is being recorded, and yeah, absolutely, and it's trying to find out exactly where we put that money. I know that I'd like to speak more on the payments to organizations, so at some point during the day or sometime in camera, I don't know whether we want to do that in public or whether we want to do it in camera, I don't care, but if we're going to have a breakdown, I'd like to see the breakdown of the franchise fees at some point.
Definitely, so I can provide that. So right now franchise fees, the ATCO franchise fee goes towards all of the culture areas. So yeah, so I can provide the breakdown for Monday if that works. And then if you want to have that conversation on Monday. Okay.
Thank you, Director. And just to confirm, I know last year, the education requisition, I think, increased year over year, about 9.5%. Is it flat for this year, or has it gone up, or has it even been finalized, or are we still waiting? I know Parkland's number is pretty solid. The seniors' housing is pretty solid. We had the presentation from the Olds Municipal Library a week or so ago with their request. Just wondering where that education portion is. And I too, before you get into the 2025 budget business cases, I've got a further comment that I would like to make at that time, but thank you.
Okay, so yes, the 2025 school requisition has increased by 277,000 for 22. $277,000.
Thank you, and if it was in the materials, I apologize. So,
No, I did say it, but I was probably going fairly quickly with a lot of numbers. Councillor Cummins?
Thank you, Director. If we can go to the wages part there, I just have a quick question. When we looked at that slide, I saw the library at the bottom there. I'm assuming that that's our I don't want to make too many assumptions there, because the library has its own budget, which would cover its own salaries. I'm assuming that's our town staff doing maintenance or something like that on the buildings, since we're responsible for the maintenance costs?
Correct, that's our facilities maintenance.
Right. Another quick question, if that's all right.
Yes.
And if we go to payments to organizations, that Councillor Ryan had mentioned earlier, I see one there, Historical Society. I've actually never seen that before. Maybe I've just missed it year over year to see that we were actually funding the Historical Society. I didn't know we were doing that. Is this like the Alberta Historical, does Olds even have a Historical Society? I was unaware that we have one and that we fund them. It's the museum. Oh, it's the museum. Okay. So, okay, because in other spots I see the museum, right, as the museum, and in this case, the Historical Society. So that was just my confusion there. All right, appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Director Lindeman. A quick question too about our debenture payment for OFL. At this time, right now, we're in renegotiation or hoping to renegotiation with the province. So those numbers could change with what's the residual amount that will be
Yes.
left owing.
Correct.
Okay.
It's just budgeted now that we will be making the payments, but we are, as we said, in talks with Alberta
Okay,
Treasury.
perfect. I think the general public needs to be aware of that as well. Thank you for that information.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the utilities side of things. So just a reminder that utilities are fully funded through our utility rates, and property taxes are not used to subsidize. Looking first at revenue, we can see an overall decrease of $233,251. Sales and user fees show a decrease of $133,000. This number is reflected of a decrease in consumption volumes based on 2024 estimates and changes to rates, which we'll go in detail over in a couple more slides. There's a decrease in other, which is reflective again of a reporting change between 2024 and 2025. That specific line item is now being recorded in sales and user fees. Transfer from other function is removing a 2024 project and returning to base. You will notice later again in the project request that there is an increase to this budget line that is being requested. If we look at expenses, total expenses are down $233,000. Salaries and wages have increased. Again, this is employees moving within their wage grids, improved budgeting of benefits, the reallocation of employees between GLs, as well as a small amount for manning the branch dump during the off hours in the summer. Contracted services has decreased $160,850. This is reflective of the extended producer responsibility program that will be starting in April. This is where a third-party organization has been hired by the province to handle recycling programs within the communities. Repairs and maintenance is down $160,000. This is removing 2024 projects that will bring the base budget down to normal. Purchases from commissions is down $182,000. So despite the water and wastewater commissions both increasing their rates, the water commission by 15 cents and the wastewater commission by 11 cents, we have seen a significant enough decrease in our water loss and inflow and infiltration to be able to decrease our budgeted volume purchased from each commission and keep our increases to our consumption rates at 1 cent for water and no increase to wastewater. There is a transfer to capital increase of $175,000, and this will be discussed in more detail on the next slide when we go through the rates. So if we look at our rates on the next slide, there we go. We have our 2025 proposed utility rates. The rates bylaw will be coming to council on Monday to committee of the whole. However, for today's purposes, these are the rates that we will be proposing. For a bit of context, when we set the rates, the base rate should be reflective of all fixed costs, and the consumption rate is reflective of all variable costs within our budgets. Because we have seen increasing costs year over year to our consumption rates from the commissions, we have tried to maintain our base rates and only pass on those consumption rate increases. Our water and wastewater base rates have not increased since 2016, while the associated fixed costs have increased by 27% over the same period. So today, administration is proposing increasing both the water and the wastewater base rate to bring these each in alignment with the actual costs. The water rate would increase by $1.80 to $14.63, and the wastewater base rate would increase by 60 cents to $19. Consumption rates, as mentioned in the previous slide, with the headway that we've been able to make on our water loss and inflow and infiltration, we're able to absorb the commission rate increases this year, while only increasing our water consumption by 1 cent to $3.19. A new rate being introduced this year is a water meter replacement rider. This would be charged on each utility account and used to support the replacement of water meters within town. As we begin our water meter replacement program, the funds received in 2025 will be transferred to capital and used as part of this program. In future years, these funds will be put aside in a reserve and available in 20 years when the next program is set to take place. Solid waste rates, as proposed, we're proposing a decrease from $25 a month to $21 a month. This again is due to the ERP program and recycling costs now being a producer pay model through the provincial government. So with all these changes, the total anticipated increase for the average residential customer would be $2 a month. I'll stop there for questions. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Director Lindeman. I was just wondering about the base rate. Does that include what we transfer to reserves? Because I know we do have a utility reserve to cover capital costs of items in the that we need for utilities. So I'm just wondering, does that cover that?
So with our water loss and inflow and infiltration, we have not been able to transfer to reserves in recent years just because of that. So there is no budgeted transfer to reserve right now in there.
Just supplementals. Would that normally cover that cost for transfer to reserve? And should we be looking at increasing this slightly higher just so that we start transferring to reserves? Because right at the moment, we're not doing that because of our I&I loss. And we're spending on Monday, we talked about a $1.8 million in capital funding to cover a lot of the projects for I&I and to try to reduce that cost to, taxpayers going down the road. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't be increasing this just slightly higher, even if it's a 10-cent increase, it would still start to add up.
I'll take that one. Very good point, Councillor Ryan. On Monday, when the rates bylaw comes to council, you will see kind of a separation of a rates bylaw, rates policy. The bylaw is going to be a lot more pared down just because you don't have to have all your rates in a bylaw. So we'll focus on utilities. One of the questions I will have for council is the idea, for example, of this commission cost. We know that the 15-cent increase on the water side, something similar on the wastewater side. We are holding the line on that because we feel we can, based on mitigation to water loss and inflow and infiltration. The question to council, should we hold the line on that? Because generally, whatever is left over from surplus utility rate revenue, that does get transferred into a reserve. But there's no set policy we will transfer, so to speak, an X amount of dollars. It's if there's money left over. And in recent years, there has not been any transfers. So the question is, we are trying to keep the idea of affordability in mind and balance that with the needs of the future. Hence the water meter replacement rider in here. But council has to, I think, take that second look and see if administration has it right or has it incorrect. And that, no, we should be budgeting now for what we know is going to come in the future and how to spread that out. But there's no perfect science to it, but on Monday, hopefully we can have a better conversation on that exact question.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Director. And just further to that, and I don't want to bog us down in this discussion of utility and dollar capture and recapture, but I just, to help me understand, so we've referenced we may not necessarily be transferring what I'll call excess utility revenues to reserves, but we do, and this is where I want to get clarity from the CEO's comments here, but we do use utility revenues to offset, if you like, either base operating or capital project costs. That's correct, right? And we are continuing to do that.
So there is a transfer to capital from utilities. Yeah, so this year it's 500 and some, just our regular 350 plus the water meter replacement, 175. Any other questions on the utility rates? Okay. So we'll look now at some property tax information. So while it's still very early for assessment values, the preliminary numbers are showing another significant increase to residential assessment. As you can see on the screen, residential assessments are up over 10% this year. 0.9% is growth, and 9.2% of that is inflation. If we look at the total assessment growth for all assessment classes, we are seeing 0.68% in growth and inflation at 6.93% for a total increase to our assessment of 7.6%. If we go to the next slide, these are more just for council's information to show how our assessment base and the corresponding tax revenue compare to our other like municipalities. The 7 municipalities that are on the screen are what Municipal Affairs deems as the most like us, using financial governance and community indicators to compare each municipality. So this first slide shows how we compare in residential assessment. As you can see, Olds has the lowest levy to assessment ratio. We have the second highest assessment base amongst our comparators and are in the lower half of actual tax levy revenue that is collected. If we look at non-residential on the next slide, again, Olds has the lowest levy to assessment ratio. We have the third highest assessment base, and again, are still in that lower half of actual revenue collected amongst our comparators. The next slide I have shows a comparison of actual tax rates amongst those same 7 comparators. As you can see, Olds has the lowest residential and non-residential rates by a fairly significant amount in some cases. All right, and so that is all I have on the base budget for today. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Director Linderman. Going back to our assessments, so perhaps then when we get a firm number of what our assessment dollars will be, maybe we've done this in the past, but I think it's going to be better explained to our general public and our residents if we say on an average $300,000 house, because of your assessment, this is what your increase will be. Because people seem to have a misconception that we keep raising taxes when, in essence, it's really the assessed values that are making the increased on value of their homes. And although it's great if you're selling your home, it's not so great if you're not. So I think that we need to do, if we could possibly come springtime, do a better job at explaining that to our residents.
Yes, definitely. We do try to show that comparison each year, but try maybe in a different way this year. So that will come when we are ready to do tax rates in April.
Thank you. And supplemental to that, then I know we talked about having the appraiser come, or the assessor come.
Yes.
In
yeah.
early spring and give a overview to council, which I think would be beneficial,
Yes.
not only to council, but also to our general public and our
Definitely.
residents.
Definitely.
So thank you for that.
Councillor Wilson?
No, thank you. Yeah, I was going to remind administration that, having that appraiser come in or assessment is going to be critical. And again, just stating the obvious, I got a lot of motherhood statements I'll be putting out today, but further what Councillor Blatza said, increase in your paper value of your house and property value certainly does not equate to a capability to pay additional tax, which we certainly hear from some of our residents. So, thank you.
Councillor Ryan? Yes. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, and I was just going to say that. I mean, however, it does show, when you take a look at this particular slide about the assessment value, that just shows the actual value of our community. And certainly, and it continues to grow. So obviously, there is value within living in the town of Olds, and purchasing a house in the town of Olds, you look at it and you can go, okay, well, this is only going to increase my property will increase in value, and this is actually a good news statement on regards to assessment. I know that it affects our property taxes at the end of the day. But we're not increasing the property taxes. It's because of the assessment and the value of living in the town of Olds. So I think that this is actually a bit of a good news too.
Definitely in CAO.
And just to add to the conversation too, some context, because when you look at the screen, obviously the tax rate and what people pay is what's most important. When we look at our comparables, we are trying to benchmark, and that's what the province does too. So I can share with council that in the conversations we've had with Alberta Treasury so far, they look at this data too. And when we're trying to ask for some support, the question they have for me is, well, what ability do you have to raise revenue? And that's why we have to be cognizant that can we and should we are different things when it comes to tax rates, utilities, franchise fees. You'd have to look at all of those three things in terms of your total kind of spend and take from taxpayers. But the province certainly is pushing us towards benchmarking. It's not what the cheapest you can give. It is what should you be funding your core services at, and it is information they have looked at and shared directly with me no more than 2 weeks ago. So just a bit of context on as you know, for this budget, but certainly as we approach April and hopefully get a more longer term or at least midterm view on our tax rate projections over the next few years and what we think is our comfort zone. So.
Councillor Ryan?
Sorry, so just for clarification, CEO Williams, then, would they look at this percentage levy to assessment and the province says, okay, you're at 0.0060. You have room to grow within your comparators to raise taxes. Is that what they're looking at? Like they're saying, you know, you're 25, difference between the 60 and the 85, there is room to go into the middle, so you can grow, you know, you can grow your revenue that way. Is that what they're looking at?
Absolutely, yes. And so again, this sheet here, we have this almost the highest assessment. Us and Blackfolds are only off by $20 million. We collect in the lower tier, but about, let's say, average from the levy. However, the percentage of the levy to assessment is the lowest. So that is where they're getting their idea that, you know, there is growth room in the town's tax rate. What, of course, we try to provide context to is then we do utility rate comparisons as best we can and franchise fee rate comparisons as best we can. But our issue with those, I believe when we presented them to council, even my first year here, but going back, we did a lot of local comparisons, like within our, you know, whether it be in our Mount Mew County region or even our commission regions, from Penhold to Crossfield, for example. That's not exactly accurate because we are the largest community between, you know, Red Deer and Airdrie. So when you look at these comparisons, they get a lot different in terms of, let's say, the average utility bill, even though we are higher than what we see in the Mountain View Regional Water Services Commission or the South Red Deer Regional Wastewater Commission. We are pretty close to average when you look at the 10,000 plus communities in Alberta. And that's what the province looks at. Because if you can go on, anyone can go on municipalaffairs.ca, go to the municipal indicators or municipal indexing, and you can put in this information yourself. You know, pick your town. They have generate a list of automatic comparators, or you can do your own comparators if you wish. But that's exactly how the government looks at this, and it may be a newer approach they're taking, but using when we met with Treasury, they were already aware. They had read our financial statements, our annual report. They understood where we were. So and it's fair. I think that has to be an honest conversation on both sides of it.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. And just further to the, it's a logical approach, I guess, but it's also hard to accept. Again, there's a variety of factors you need to look at, and I'm thinking now in the case of the education tax requisition, which is a 6% increase year over year, 15% over 2 years, and on top of a provincial budget surplus of about $4.6 billion. So there's a lot of yin and yang things going back and forth that, you know, you try and look at as far as, again, affordability, competing municipalities, trying to attract investment and industry to our municipality. It's quite a complex world.
And absolutely. But even in the 2019 amendments to the MGA, they added to the core purposes when you see good governance, when you see public safety, economic development, economic growth. Like the province has given us direction to do this. It is very deliberate on their part that we have to be agents of financial health, not just for ourselves, but for the province. With the ed tax, correct. Like that is the province's hidden way of getting us to take the political fallout for raising money for schools. It's always been that way. It always will be that way. So it's kind of like arguing with gravity. It still applies to you whether you like it or not. But the issue with ed tax, when your growth is based on inflation like ours is, you have you have the same amount of properties paying more money. Whereas you look at communities that are growing, like building per building, that's even if your ed tax goes up, like you have more property sharing that load. And that's why economic growth is part of one of our 3 key themes here. It doesn't happen overnight, but we're not going to tax or cut our way out of, either current financial challenges or what we see in the economy with inflation and infrastructure needs. We have to grow. And as uncomfortable as housing zoning changes are or new industrial ideas might be, there's no sympathy from the province here. Grow. That's it.
And if I may, good discussion, and we're conscious of the time, but growth is good, residential is good, affordable housing is good, industry and manufacturing is critical as far as our tax base goes. And again, I just draw it back to our education requisition based on the numbers the director provided. This is going to be just slightly under $5 million now, right? And 15% over 2 years. So thank you.
Oh, Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, how easy would it be to put together a table like this that included tax, utilities, franchise fees, residential, non-residential, so that you get a good feel? Because looking at this doesn't tell me much. I look at this and know that not everybody charges 100% for utilities. I know communities have a higher proportion of non-residential tax base, so that all goes towards making a good decision on your community when you have all that information in front of you in one table. That would be great.
Yep, that is definitely something that can be provided.
Yes, actually, that is a very good question. It was one that was discussed amongst the Mayor's Caucus as well with the province. And it kept coming back to, well, why can't you collect on your utility bills? And there's some municipalities that are just smaller than we are. It's never going to work out where we're going to be able to give an answer because nobody's population, it all varies.
All right, so we are through the base budget now and on to our project list. Does council need a bit of a break before we move on, or? Okay, so if we want to take a 10-minute, 5 to 10-minute break? Sure.
Yes, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for your patience. And we will now continue on to the next portion of operating project requests. Go ahead, Director Linderman.
Thank you. Before we move into the project request, Councillor Wilson does have a few words he would like to say.
Thank you, Director. And I am aware of time, as I always am, so I will always be brief. But I acknowledge the work that's been done with the budget. I do like numbers, even though I may not fully understand them all, and it usually takes me a while post the presentation of those numbers to marinate on them and understand them, which will be a process check that I'll direct to the CAO in a minute. But when I look at the materials that were prepared, I'm encouraged certainly by everything that's been said by administration so far, but also I think year over year, our base budget is up something less than 1%. So kudos there with all the pressures and downloading and everything that's already been mentioned. The project list, tax supported of about 850,000, I think, is about a 2.4% increase. So again, when I benchmark that to inflation, whatever metric you want to use, whether it's the CPI or our real inflation, certainly seems reasonable in that regard. But what I will look for in this next discussion is for administration and the staff to help us understand what those projects are trying to de-risk, help us prioritize, because again, I've already touched on it. At the end of the day, I'm looking at a variety of lenses: affordability, ability to attract investment and families, industry and commerce, business. CAO had some enlightening comments relative to what Treasury is looking for and our benchmarking. So there's a lot of different offsets going on. But as we get into this next discussion, certainly need some help prioritizing the spends that are being asked for and how and what they're going to do to help us either de-risk events, activities, exposures without jeopardizing the organization and without further compromising our service levels. So I just wanted to put that on the table. And my process check for the CAO is, so we've got December 2nd and December 9th kind of as the next milestones. I've already alluded, I generally like to marinate on things, and some of my aha moments come after the initial discussions. We will have the opportunity on December 2nd, whether it be with capital or with OPEX, to come back and probe a bit, seek clarity, and maybe massage a little bit, right? We're not final today.
That's correct, yes. I'm recognizing your need to marinate. December 2nd, obviously, we have one question from Councillor Ryan about franchise fees breakouts. So that's one of those, emergent items we'll bring back just for information, but CapEx and OpEx will be presented again with more of a recommendation from an administration as opposed to today, which is just information sharing and explaining. And then council can deliberate again, and on the 9th, we'll follow roughly the same process. And if council feels comfortable passing then, great. If not, we'll have to look at a special meeting into December.
Councillor Cummings?
Thanks. I was just wondering if I could get a little bit of clarification on an item you brought up, but near the beginning when you sped through a lot of numbers there. You had mentioned that with the price on pollution increase that's happening in April, you're estimating the cost of the town on the price of pollution payment to the federal government would be $150,000, I think you said?
Correct.
And again, in the presentation you provided to us in the package, you had a 1% tax rate increase for the town of Olds would equate to be $110,000. So we're looking at basically 1% of our tax revenue is going to pay for the price of pollution in 2025, or the price of, say, an RCMP officer or something similar. Because I like to get some real life equivalencies to what we're paying. So if we look at $150,000, we're looking at an RCMP officer from what I'm seeing in the budget. So our citizens can relate to the fact that we're paying that much carbon tax, that we have one less police officer because of the carbon tax or one less of this. Those numbers are all jiving for me, right?
Correct, yep,
Alright,
you are
thank you.
correct. All right, and Councillor Wilson?
Right, and so a good discussion, good point. And so then, we've already talked, you already mentioned, our trending of assessment values seem to be in that 10% range, which was roughly what it was last year. And at the project list, the way it stands now, tax supported 850,000. So again, using that 110 equivalent. If we do everything, and setting aside the assessment piece, we're talking an 8% property tax increase if we did everything exclusive of any assessment impact.
Correct. Okay. So we will move on to the projects now. Next, our first up, we have our COLA, our cost of living adjustment, and I will ask CAO to present this item.
Thank you, Sheena. So in the decision paper for this, which should be on the next page. Nope, that's over. Oh, it's there. I knew that. So right now we have CPI COLA, which we use for Alberta year over year, trending towards 2.85%. With conversations with our local municipalities in Mountain View County, I believe everyone is going to council, each administration is going to council with a 2% COLA recommendation. I believe Mountain View County has approved that number as well, which we are recommending to council as well. On the second page is the last 6 or 7 years of COLA given to CPI actual. So we've been on a good trajectory for the last few years. And yeah, the overall cost of a 2% recommendation is projected at 139,771. Don't think it needs much more explanation than that, but happy to take any questions.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Director Linderman, through you to COO Williams. Just remind me again how often, though, we do review our salary steps or grids for our general public to know that we are continuously comparing and budgeting accordingly and trying to keep our staff within that 50th percentile of our comparators, correct?
Correct. There is a informal policy we're hoping to put a bit more structure around soon enough, but every 2 years we do a third-party review of our comparative municipalities and for salaries, for comparable positions. Our goal with that review is to be average, essentially, within the 50th percentile of what other municipalities pay. Last one was done in 2022, and you'll see in 2023 on the screen the 4% COLA given, which was the aberration on the high end, we were found to be lower than average, below the 50%. We were around 38% was kind of where we're standing on then. The next review will be done in 2025 for 2026 consideration for council.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Director, and just through to the CEO. Obviously, we have to take care of our arguably our most valuable resource. But if we do fall behind in these COLA adjustments, it's pay me now or pay me later, essentially, right? Further Councillor Blatz's comment around the salary reviews adjustments. If we don't provide these adjustments 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we have to play significant catch-up, correct?
That's the logic. Eventually, if we're not keeping pace with, I don't want to say CPI, that's a loose term, but certainly the market, it is a factor in people's decisions to work or motivation. Certainly salary is not the only factor of what makes people stay at a job or come to a position, but yeah, that has been the case recently, for sure.
No other questions on COLA? Next, we have our council initiatives, and again, I'll look to CAO for this one.
Okay, so council initiatives, this was a fancy term of saying mostly election costs. We are increasing our budget, was it 20,000, Marcy? 15,000, when we subtract the cost of renting the tabulators versus what we expect to hire in deputy returning officer costs to help with the ballot counting and what have you. Regional orientation for the new council has been set already, so ourselves, Mountain View County, Sundre, Disbury, Carstairs, Cremona, we are all participating again, October 2025, so that cost is included here. Candidate orientation is something we're not booked yet, but we're considering offering a third-party session hosted in Olds to invite interested candidates for council to attend almost like an orientation session, information session on what it means to be a municipal councillor. And then the strategic planning that was thrown in here as well. Council generally budgets, I believe, little bit more than this annually, is it? Yeah, but we thought we can bring it in for $7,000. It is your last year, and we have a program lined up that I think will be valued not just to this council, but to the incoming council as well, to better explain what was done, why it was done, and if the next council wants to carry on some of the strategies and projects implemented by this current council.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. I just had a comment about the candidate orientation. My understanding is that Alberta Municipalities is looking at this as well and might be putting on those courses, so it wouldn't be us to have to pay for that. They might be doing something for early, like maybe in the summertime or early fall, to have, whether it's going to be webinars or something like that, but you might want to check with Alberta Municipalities to see if they have something planned. I heard through the grapevine there that that's a possibility, so that might negate having to put in the 7,000 for the candidate orientation.
Correct. I believe they are doing something in correspondence with what they call the municipal pledge and the respectful dialogue policy. So those will be webinars, as I understand it, into the summer and fall. And yeah, obviously that's great. This one in particular is proposed to bring a facilitator to Olds to host kind of a session in person for more specific, localized. So, but again, certainly if council's doesn't think it's necessary, we don't have to include it. But it's a novel idea given I think the renewed interest in local government and perhaps some of the decreasing quality of dialogue we're seeing across the political spectrum, mainly on social media.
Councillor Ryan?
In that case, would we consider maybe looking at a regional thing as well for that kind of orientation, so that we can share costs?
If others are interested, we'll sure look at it.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Director. So I notice here we've got a election reserve of $20,000. Given the regularity of elections, do we have a policy on funding that reserve, or are we just more or less haphazardly covering that reserve?
So we have a reserves policy. It is not specific in there just because it is part of our general operating reserve that it's transferred to. But we do transfer 5,000 every year, non-election year, to that reserve. And it is set aside specifically for election. Councillor Daly, did you have a question? No. Okay. We'll move on next to our AP automation and purchase orders. So this is myself. This is the implementation of a full accounts payable automation system, and it includes purchase order and invoice modules. We have in the past asked for a purchase order module that was approved. However, when the thought of moving to an accounts payable automation system was thought of, we decided to hold off on the purchase order module and do the two in conjunction with each other. This system would take, so it would be fully electronic. All invoices would come in via email, be imported into the system. The system reads the invoice and then puts all that information into our financial software, sends it off via email to our managers, directors for approval. So everything is done electronically, no more printing of any invoices at all. So just with that being done, it decreases, obviously, manual errors that can happen with, obviously, human entry. And then, of course, it provides real-time financial insights. So having that purchase order module, before someone buys something, they would enter it in, purchase order, get the approval, then purchase. That then is put into our financial system right away and as a committed fund. So any reporting would be real-time. People are able to look at what they've spent day by day in real time. All right, any questions? Yes, Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Director. So we've seen over the last couple of years a move to much more computerized accounting system, and all in this one particular group of softwares that work together. And we've seen subscription costs break down for each unit. Do you have an idea of the total annual subscription cost for our entire accounting platform as you see it with this included into it?
I don't off the top of my head, but I can get that for you in the next few minutes. And Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. So, yeah, could you help me understand, so the integration, maybe this is along the same lines as what Councillor Cummings is asking, but the integration to the work order system, like you've talked about relative to the purchase order. And obviously, this payables, automated payable system is contingent on the vendor sending us a timely invoice as far as cost tracking and financial reporting goes. If months lapse between the completion of the work and the receipt of the invoice, we still have a gap in terms of tracking, do we or do we not?
No, so employees would request the item prior to purchasing even, so that would be entered into the system via the purchase order at that point, yeah. And then it immediately is then in our financial system and able to be reported on as a committed fund. Councillor Dale?
So my inquiry was very similar to Councillor Wilson's, but then to take it one step further, does this system then takes that invoice information and then electronically pays the vendor as well?
It can. We have opted out of that part of that module in this particular system just because they charge you per payment. When we don't need that, we can have it go into our financial system and just continue making payments as we do now and not having to pay per invoice on a payment.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, more questions? We'll move on to the next item, which is, again, CAO and new positions.
Thank you, Sheena. So containing this project sheet for a value of $210,000 is increase to full-time staff for 2 positions. In that is a administrative support position for human resources, which was restructured / unfunded in 2023 for this year's budget. The restructure comes from our human resources coordinator position, which is now going to go to administrative position. And the third, which council has talked about at length, and I won't spend much time on it, is the third municipal enforcement, the CPO position. So, any questions? Myself and Director Andrew are here on those. Sorry, I guess I should also, I put down some things, more specific data from 2023 financial statements, which council was presented with before. It's our overall spend based on the fiscal year 2023 in terms of salaries and benefits. Above, we do see obviously that rising since 2023 with a 2025 projection should the decision paper be approved in full to $9.1 million. In these comparators, which vary slightly from the ones you've seen during the property tax discussions, we are still among the lowest in terms of how much we spend on staff. And outside of COLA and new positions, it's just important to know for council as well, some of the costs of having staff are out of our control, such as the LAPP pension program, our health benefits, and things like WCB as well. So those why also another reason why you may see variations to overall staffing costs. But that's all I had.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. I have a question with regards to how these positions and these two positions that you're talking about, CEO Williams, with regards to the reorganization that we went through at our beginning of our term, so to speak, and how they sit within the flow chart of our organization, where the gaps were pointed out within that reorganization of our organization review, where they sit, and are these filling those gaps, or are we looking at other gaps that might be more important? And my concern about the CPO addition, I've mentioned it many times about not being in favor of having an additional person doing that, but to prioritize what our current guys are doing. So that's my feeling, but I would like to see what you have to say with regards to the gaps in the chart after we did the organizational review.
Yep, good question. So with the CPO position, that wasn't necessarily addressed at specific length in the organizational review. This largely comes from service level discussions and and bylaw and associated functions being always a topic of concern, conversation in the public. So that piece I can't tie to the organizational review. That's directly tied to council's service level and where it wants it to go. And we talked both of the just reprioritizing what we currently do and perhaps triaging workload. And we also talked at length about adding capacity to do things such as more robustly, whether it be parking or traffic enforcement or the like. On the human resources admin side, I would say this directly relates to a lot of the areas identified in the org review. The words organizational culture, professional development, training, succession planning, and other things, those were identified fairly heavily in that review as areas where certainly staff saw things lacking and where consultants saw room for improvement. And as it's described in the paragraph below, with one HR position and the payroll position and IT, we can keep the lights on. We can accomplish the key functions. The issue is we have a bit of a deficit now where we do want to improve on professional development, on staff training, on succession planning, on overall cultural improvements. We don't have any more horsepower to do those things. Consultants, always an option. Those cost money too with never guaranteed results. So answer your question, I think the HR admin is directly supported by the org review. We do need that position to make any progress, I would say, beyond the just doing the day-to-day. But again, it's at council's discretion how important that progress is.
Councillor Ryan?
Supplemental, so that's great, because I looked at that HR position as the same, what you've just been talking about, because I remember that being a gap in the org review. But I thought that there was another position that was in the org review that we had not filled, and I can't remember off the top of my head, because it's been about 2 years since I've seen that chart. But I just want to make sure that when we look at positions that we are, filling those positions that were done and identified. And certainly that HR one is one of them, and you're correct. I mean, I don't think that the CPO position was another, but I did think that there was something else that we had not filled, and maybe we've already filled it with the asset management being filled. I know that was one area that was identified, but I would just want to make sure that we are, when we look at positions, that we are going along with those and filling our gaps that we need right now. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you
your
are correct.
comments.
There were I think two specific positions mentioned in name. One was the planner, which we had filled shortly thereafter, and the other one was what turned in the org chart, which I think there was a few recommendations, options rather, the GIS technician. That is covered off by the asset management coordinator. Yeah, they're not exactly the same roles, but we wouldn't be in a position to afford both of them. So I think I'm consider that one closed. Yeah. So.
I have Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Director, and I'll preface my comment with, again, the recognition that, as has been already mentioned by administration, that we are a lean organization. Having said that, I will say that I'm lukewarm to the HR admin position. I appreciate the CAO's comments relative to we can manage and maintain the base business, keep the lights on, and meet our basic needs. And again, I'm looking at this in the context of, for lack of a better word, the financial purgatory that we find ourselves in, and the length of time it's going to take for us to emerge from there and those challenges. So I appreciate the comments, I hear the comments, I am lukewarm at this point in this year to the HR admin position. I've increased my acceptance of, for lack of a better word, of the ME position. As I've said before in this forum, when you look around and you see the growing social disorder, our Director of Protective Services has referred to it at various times through his updates. Fortunately, I don't think we've got a significant issue in town, in our town, but certainly outside you are seeing that trend. So to me, part of this is being proactive and getting ahead of the curve, so to speak, with the additional position. I do ask the question, I had a discussion with, I believe it's Leif Svensson from the RCMP division a while back, and he talked about maybe the solution isn't so much from the RCMP side, was his perspective of adding an RCMP individual, but adding backroom support. And I wonder if that's an opportunity here on a contract term temp basis within ME to offload some of that increasing paperwork and administration from our ME folks to allow them to be out there doing what they're really supposed to do, which is enforcement. Because again, we all know as well and acknowledge salary and wages are our largest cost, and a recurring cost, and a cost that is difficult to remove once you have it. So, thank you.
I'll have to pass that to Director Andrew. I'm not in a position to provide an answer on what might be available.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'm very well aware of the position of Corporal Svensson on a project that he's working on that he is actually going to present to council in relation to the RCMP staffing model and proposed enhancements to that policing. When it is applied to municipal enforcement, unfortunately, it is a very separate entity, a very separate issue. And so I can say with 100% certainty that there are no extra added efficiencies of administrative support to our ME officers. It is physically a presence situation of officers. It's the administrative support is there. They just don't have the physical officers on the street to go and do the job is our number one priority, and we can't free them up. And an example that I'll give you is that right now we're seeing that a percentage basis that we're looking at about 50% of all municipal fines or tickets issued are actually being challenged in court right now. And so that's not something that an administrator or admin support person can do in their presence. It's requiring the officer that issued the citation to actually attend court to defend the ticket or to help in the prosecution. And so things like that are taking the officers off the street and making them not available. The other issue is, of course, is just the physical volume and the expectation of the community. So we look outside now with the snow blowing, and if it hits a trigger for our uptown snow removal event, well, if that happens, I'm not saying it'll happen today, but it could happen on a significant basis that, you have two officers and, you have to make the decision that they're going to be expected to come in the middle of the night to issue the tickets and towing, to remove vehicles so that efficient snow operations can happen. And that means that they either have to go home early so that they can go and rest because they're going to be up all night. And then when they do that, then the next day they're not expected to be at work. You can't have people working 24 hours. So we'll have an entire day without any municipal enforcement protection. So those are the things that we're seeing on a more regular basis. And as the community grows with more issues and things like that, we physically need boots on the ground.
So next I had Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Director. So just a quick question on the HR position. So year over year, what I'm seeing is we've had a full-time HR, I think you used the term coordinator, in the department that would have had a salary rate. We eliminated that position, therefore reducing the overall salary of the HR department. This year, we're increasing the overall salary commitment for the HR department by less than what we reduced it by when we removed the position, because the HR admin position is certainly less paid than the coordinator. So year over year, if I've got my math correct, the HR budget for salaries is decreased since we decided to restructure the HR department. And that this increase may look like an increase today, but it's not actually an increase year over year. It's a decrease in funding for the HR department salaries.
It's an increase year over year when you're looking at 2024, because that was unfunded in 2024. But if you look at 2023, it's a decrease from 2023 to 2025, as asked.
So just a supplementary on that, so I get it all wrapped around. When we look at things like this year specific, sometimes we don't get a good picture of the overall organizational change. So when I look at the overall organizational change from the organizational review, and we were looking at changes in the HR department, administration believes in what you've stated, that the HR department in this new configuration would be better suited to the goals that we've asked you to perform in the HR world at a reduced cost from the original when we came on board, sort of thing, before the organizational review. So I'm looking at that as a great move forward. We're leaner, we're more efficient, we're more effective, and we are funding it at a reduced rate. So that sounds great to me. I do have another question, but it's about the CPO position, so I'll let Councillor Daly go first.
Perfect. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Lindeman. And I have a question in regards to the CPO position. Obviously, bringing another position on board, which I feel is a positive move and proactive in regards to some of the comments that Director Andrew has made as far as workload and allowing us to have more extended hours of operation with our CPOs. But with that, will there not also be on the capital side, will there not be an ask for additional equipment, including, their personal protective equipment as well as vehicles, so forth, radios, that type of thing going forward?
Yes, thanks for the question. And so the capital requirement is actually negligible. So there is no proposed additional patrol vehicle being requested with the addition of the position. We feel that with that expanded time frame of service delivery, that the overlap can be managed with the two current vehicles in the fleet. And so that would be the first action, is that you utilize the rotation of having two vehicles available all the time, and then the cycling of work where if you have the paperwork time or the administrative hours that you need to do, then you focus that in the office, and then you can take walk-in calls or do the phone work, whereas the other vehicles can be out being utilized. So the only other addition of that equipment is small enough in scope that again, like personal protective equipment is a small item that would be in our operating budget. We did propose in the capital budget is the replacement of one of the ME vehicles that's in the current inventory because of life cycle and end of use, but it's not an addition to. The intent is that that vehicle would be dispersed. So hopefully that answers.
Thank you.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you again. So, as everybody's aware, I'm sure that I'm a huge supporter of the CPO position being added to our calendar here. I seem to recall, and because it was mentioned a couple of times here today, the organizational review. In that review, the publishers created or had a table that showed all of the ME and RCMP detachment officers for our comparator communities. And like most things, we were significantly lower than the average. We were the lowest number of CPOs and bylaw officers of all of our comparator communities. I've heard, as we all have, from citizens for years now, that there is no presence, or there's a lack of presence, or we're not enforcing, we're creating all these bylaws and we're just not enforcing them. I think this is a good step forward to regain the confidence of our community that when we create bylaws, we're able to enforce our bylaws. And I agree entirely with this position. If not, looking forward to future years where we have more capabilities of that department.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, to turn the conversation back to the HR admin. Again, I just reinforce, I'm still lukewarm to this position, given our challenges, as I've alluded to, and as we've talked about, and the optics to our citizens, even though this would be what I'll call perhaps an economical ad, if you look at 2023 versus now. I'm at the point where I'm looking at direct causal linear benefits to our citizens. And when I look at this HR admin, again, I appreciate we are a lean organization. My path to demonstrate benefit to our citizens is probably like a sawtooth, whereas, as we've just heard and said, with an ME position, a little bit more of a direct causal link in terms of everything that most of our citizens have been asking for in terms of visibility, enforcement. I do have questions, not for this forum, around, and as the Director Andrew alluded to, once we issue the tickets, the court time and the collection of the fines and everything, but that's a topic for another day. Thanks.
Any other questions on the positions? Okay, so next we have a marketing plan, and again, this will be CAO speaking to.
Thank you again, Sheena. So this ties in directly to Council's strategic plan, and one of the objectives in the goals to create a town marketing plan. So we do have a concept in place, and we will commence work on it regardless of this decision paper or not. It will be largely internal driven and built. The dollar amount being requested today is just above our current communications budget. That to hone some of the documents and videos we plan on creating, there's going to be some need for contracted services on the design side. And then for what we want to do with advertising promotion side, where we want to do something a bit different, go to social media, online channels, YouTube ads with our curated videos that we plan on producing in-house. And we estimate that cost at $10,000 for an advertising campaign that will take place from 2025 into the first half of 2026. So Council presented with a more robust concept of what we are building once it kicks off, but for now we see this $15,000 as needed to make headway with what we'll produce, so to speak. So, happy to take any questions though.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, and I'm mixed. On the one hand, I say it's only $15,000, and I've said this comment before, so I apologize. Not in this forum, not today, but on the other hand, I say, but it is $15,000, and eloquently worded by the CAO. I'm thinking here, well, how can I hold them accountable to the strat plan if I don't spend $15,000 to get the marketing plan? So that linkage there certainly would say spend the 15,000, but I guess I'm lukewarm on this one as well. And again, I recognize it's only $15,000, but these days, $15,000 is $15,000. And we do have vehicles underway right now, as we've already talked about, with EDAC and with the Regional Business Support Network and with NGEI, overarching all of Invest Olds. So I'm thinking if we punt this for a year, other than we give some leeway around the strat plan implementation, how much risk is there? So, thanks.
Mayor Dole?
Thank you very much. I think we'd be cognizant of noticing that it will not be successful unless there are dollars invested. We've done nothing but talk about economic development, bringing people to the town of Olds and trying to build that living area where people will love to come and live, work, play, and educate. So that would be exactly the benefit, the positive image of the town, which we just previously talked about at the beginning of this budget. So I fully support this.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Lindeman. And I would also like to go back and refer to Councillor Wilson's comments in regards to attracting industry to the town of Olds. And you know, first we're attracting and building the houses and so forth, and then we need to attract the industry to come to Olds. And if we don't have a marketing plan, if we're not able to sell ourselves, well, then the other communities around us will have that advantage as far as going forward and attracting those industries. And so, being part of the EDAC committee, this is one thing that is essential to moving our plan forward in creating economic development within our community. So I'm in full support of this budget item.
Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Director. So not only am I in full support of this, I would encourage us to put a billboard right beside the town of Sundree's billboard on Highway 2 coming south from Red Deer. When a smaller community like Sundree has the wherewithal and the wisdom to advertise their community, not only from a bulletin board, but I see their ads on social media. I see their ads when I play a Facebook game on my phone. They are actively advertising their community to make their community grow, and I echo Councillor Daly's words entirely. If we want to see investment in our town, we may have to spend some money to invest in our town ourselves, and marketing is the #1 way to do that. Get the word out that we're open for business, and this is why opening businesses in Olds is the best way forward. So kudos to the plan, appreciate it entirely.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. I thought Councillor Cummings was going to say it was something similar to what Airdrie did with Crossfield, and said if you lived in Airdrie, you'd be home by now. So if you lived in Olds, you'd be home by now. But yeah, I do agree with this, having a marketing plan, simply because it goes along with our strategic plan, and that's what we do strategic planning for. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. We'll move on to IT equipment increase. So this is an increase to an already existing budget line. We currently budget $50,000 a year for small IT equipment such as computers and such. For 2025, we're requesting an increase of $72,500, and then going forward to increase that budget by $40,000, so it would be a $90,000 budget line item within the base budget. The increase for this year, for 2025, is just due to life cycle costs, our life cycle replacement on a bunch of infrastructure, that being our switches at $50,000. All of our switches have come to end of life and are an important part of our network system. Should a switch go down, that switch, whichever building that switch is controlling, that entire building is down for a few days until a new one can be brought in and reconfigured. So the plan is to do all 20 network switches in 2025, and then to put them onto a cycle where they are not all being done at the same time. Some will be done in year 3, some in year 4, and then some in year 5. There's also an increase to computer equipment in this budget ask. For the $50,000, we are normally able to replace about 15 computers. We have 27 that are coming to end of life in 2025, so that is an increased ask there. And with that, I would open it to questions. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you for this information, Director Linderman. I'm assuming then with the 27 computers that we will do the same as we're going to do with the switch cycles, that we will be integrating new computers in a more timely fashion and not having to replace another 27 or even 30 within 5 years, or in 5 years.
Right, so we do have our computers currently on a life cycle system. However, this is a big year, obviously, that needs to be spread out a little bit more. You're correct. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Lindeman. And I think I read it in here somewhere that this is going to be the IT implementation into the new administrative offices renovation that's taking place.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to find exactly what you're referring to. But as far as, like, it will all be taken with us, so none of it will be for naught, if that's what, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. So these upgrades, and I'm thinking in particular the switches, I don't know, perhaps the controller, which would be a combination of 52,000. Do these help us mitigate cyber threat security? Or is there a risk exposure if we, you mentioned they're at the end of their 5-year life cycle or whatever. So I'm just trying to understand, other than its 5-year life cycle, are these things being held together with baler twine and bubble gum and duct tape, or do we have a cyber threat or along those lines?
It doesn't affect cyber threat as far as I'm aware. It is more just, so the switches themselves run our network. And so when one goes down, like I said, that whatever is being controlled on that particular switch can no longer be used. So printers, computers, the entire network essentially for that building is down. They did run whatever they run on the switches, and they are already degrading, and it is affecting our network speed to that point where things are obviously for everyone slower and just that needing replacement. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Director. So help me out understand the difference in this case between capital and operational, because we are dealing with, or these asks are all operational, but when I think of replacing hardware, I'm thinking capital expenditure, not operational costs. So if we were looking at a policy of replacing IT hardware with new IT hardware, should this not be part of the capital budget for IT replacement rather than operational budget?
So they can go either way with items like this, because the individual cost of each item is under that $5,000 threshold. Pooled together when you're buying large amounts at one time, yes, it's over that threshold, so you can do that, but then you have to keep an inventory, and you have to, when you replace one, you have to mark it down and everything like that, so it is a lot easier if they don't meet that threshold to put it in the operating. Councillor Cummings?
Just for my curiosity's sakes here, what do we do with the old IT equipment?
Computers and stuff are erased, fully erased, and then donated. There is a company that comes and picks them up. And other stuff, I am not sure. But usable equipment, such as computers and printers, are donated.
Just to follow up on that then, can we get an idea about that? Because I think it's fascinating that we're donating our IT equipment. I'd like to know who we're donating it to,
Yep.
and what the end source or end result of that donation is. And I think too, our citizens would be happy to know that we are not just selling it for a couple of bucks here and there. We're actually doing something altruistic with it. So if we could get some more information on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely. Any other questions? Okay, so our next item is body cameras, and Director Andrew will take that one.
Thank you. So we've talked about the in-car and body-worn camera systems for municipal enforcement officers. The current system that has been in place has come to end of life, so we currently are struggling to keep any of them operating with any success. And so in today's law enforcement environment, these tools have become absolutely critical, and the reality is that they serve as an unalterable record of the event or the encounter, and it provides protection for the officers against frivolous claims, and also provides protection against citizens or the people involved in the exchange, because that record of actions, words are recorded and can't be altered, so they have a double function in use. As you've seen in the current news, the RCMP are currently rolling out their officer-worn camera system here right away. The system that we're proposing is exactly the same system and from the same manufacturer, as it's been deemed the most reliable and user-friendly system. We have looked into the potential of being able to piggyback off the RCMP's purchase and or use, which is absolutely not a possibility, simply because of the federal nature of it. So even though we can utilize the same equipment, we have no opportunity to buy it at a discount. That being said, we have researched and found that the option here is to create a lease program, because just like all of this IT equipment that we just spoke about, it has a short lifespan, and you make a big purchase and then you own this stuff that has no purpose or gets donated or thrown away. So what this is proposing is we turn it into a lease situation where we don't ever actually own the equipment, and it comes fully supported in the lifespan of the lease. So if a device has damage to it or a battery or any kind of a technical glitch, they literally replace it, no questions asked. They have all of the service and support, whether it's IT support or hardware support that comes to us. And so that's what makes this very appealing, is that the operational costs of this system become minimal other than the annual payments. And as we would go forward, then we would look at renewing the lease in every 5-year term, and then they would upgrade the equipment in that time frame, which with the current trends, they indicate that the lifespan of this equipment is 3 to 5 years before it becomes obsolete. And this also provides us the opportunity within this lease that they provide additional cameras, so that we do have, it would incorporate enough cameras for extra officer and or having spare, so that if you do have that short term where something goes down, you're not left without, which currently we don't have that ability. We literally have 2 cameras, and when they don't work, you go without.
So I have Councillor Ryan, Mayor Dahl, and then Councillor Blatz.
Thank you. I have a question with regards to whether or not this could be used in court of law. Like, is this camera, the information, is it stored somewhere where, you know, we can call it up later if there's a case that, like you mentioned earlier, about 50% of the tickets are going to court? Can this information be used in that way?
Yes, absolutely. This is the one of the few approved methods of providing evidence in the court of law. So an example I'll give you is, you know, it was mentioned that with technology, it's like, why can't we outfit our officers with like GoPro cameras, right? You can buy them for $700 from Best Buy, and they're great. Well, they are great. But the problem is it's the reliability and security of that data that it can't be altered. So even we, as the owner of the devices, can't alter this image. So you can't get in and modify it, and that's essentially what you're paying for, is the encryption and security of this data. Yes, it's saved on a secure server of this company and can be extracted and utilized with reliability.
Mayor Dahl?
Thank you. That's exactly what I had just noted here, that we talked about ticket revenue loss due to municipal enforcement MEs not being available because they can't make it to court. So that was exactly what I was going to ask as well. So thanks for answering the question.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Director Linderman, and I'm not sure if you can answer this question or perhaps Director Andrew, but okay, so I did read that the RCMP in November of 2024 here are going to be rolling their body-worn cameras out as well. And I understood, and maybe I understood incorrectly, but is that not also going to be a cost that we will have to incur as a municipality? Was that explained to us once by the RCMP? Because I don't recall seeing it anywhere in our budgets here, and I'm curious as to know when we will see that as a budget line and how much do we think the anticipated cost will be. It's a benefit. I mean, I think it's a necessary purchase and expenditure, but I'm just curious about that, if that can be answered.
I can speak to it at a higher level, and so you're correct that those are costs that we will see as a municipality down the road. Right now, Staff Sergeant Wright hasn't been given a specific time frame of the implementation in Olds. I do know that the training for our local officers is going to start the first week of February. So essentially, anytime after that, we could see them. And the one piece that comes is that, yeah, these are those operational costs that have been mentioned. So there's a couple on the queue. So their service pistol modernization program is upcoming. So we'll be paying for the new firearms or sidearms that the members carry. Body cameras, there's new tasers that have been implemented that we're going to see. So there's a whole schwack of extra things that we will see those costs. Traditionally speaking, with the RCMP and how they pass those costs to the municipality, and Director Linderman might correct me if I'm wrong, but I would anticipate that we probably won't see those costs until 2025 budget, but it might come through in their quarter 3 or quarter 4 financials with us. So we typically see a lag, and the RCMP's year-end financial term is it April 1st or March? Yeah, so it's a little off of our municipal schedule, so that does create a little bit of a problem for us.
Thank you for that, and I guess if it does come through in 2025, then we will just anticipate a budget amendment or adjustment.
So they've already provided, the budget that's in the base budget is what has been provided from K-Division, and it does include all of those items. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see that, so I apologize if I missed that.
Next, I had Councillor Wilson and then Daley.
Thank you, Director. And comment/question. And Director Andrew, nothing grabs my attention more than when you open up your comments with "this is critical," so kudos to you, you've got my attention. I'm not sure this is a necessary purchase, and again, preface my comment, it is only $13,500, but it is $13,500. Currently, I believe, so we don't have any dashboard cam in our vehicles, and the officers on the ME side do not have any body cameras. I'm just trying to understand what the personal safety risk is. I'm hearing, certainly from a court of law and from a judicial perspective and proof and so on, there could be some value, or there would be some value. Are our officers at risk, and have they been at risk on the ME side by not having these cameras for some period of time? And what is our incidence of events? And we've acknowledged there's a disturbing trend happening in communities. What are we seeing here? How many times have we said, oh man, I wish we had body camera evidence from a judicial perspective? Thank you.
Yeah, so, I'm very careful with my words about saying critical, and in this case, I cannot understate that enough, that it is critical. And I'm going to pose that back to you is that it's $13,000, but what is a lawsuit worth to us as an organization, and the reduced liability of us having that undeniable proof of an interaction? And unfortunately, speaking to our, it makes it sound doom and gloom with the increasing social disorder, but challenging the law is a real problem that we're dealing with. And so the issue when it comes to the court of law is, it comes down to a he said, she said, and the burden of proof. And these devices provide that burden of proof. And so in a world where allegations can be made about misconduct and discreditable communications or actions, this is the absolute solid concrete proof that we need to be able to defend our people that are put into an absolutely horrendous position on a regular basis about being accused of making false statement and false actions. And it also, on the other side, provides that protection for citizens where if they are treated in an appropriate manner, it gives us that undeniable proof where we have the ability to manage and rectify that if that was the case. But these devices are essential part of policing in today's world.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, and appreciate that answer, and truly a supplemental, and apologize for my ignorance. These are both audio and video? Okay.
Okay, Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Lindeman, and I would concur with what Director Andrew says, and also, as we see in the media nowadays, this also is a deterrent for bad behavior of our people that our CPOs are dealing with, is when they see a body-worn camera, I'm sure it deters them from escalating a situation on their behalf as well. And so I think this is a very well-warranted expense, not only for our officers, but also for the citizens that are also in direct contact with our officers. But just for clarification, Director Andrew, does the $13,000, that is a one-year subscription for both car cameras as well as body-worn cameras? And then do you see an increase in that coming, or is this going to be a contract that we're in for a specific amount of time? I know you mentioned 5 years. Is that what we have to sign up for and go forward?
Yeah, no, excellent question. So it is a 5-year lease, and so that is a locked-in price. So the negotiated lease price is the fixed number, and it's just divided over 5 years from the time that we sign on and start to the complete. And so this is complete of a car and body-worn system, and that's all installation and all costs associated, including the server storage and the support provided by the vendor. So again, this is a one-stop shop, all-in price with that guarantee for that 5-year period.
Supplemental, just for clarification again, so $13,358 for 5 years? Every year or? Every year. Every year, that's what, yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you. No, I was just going to comment earlier that, and Director Andrew did say that I think it's a sad reality that it's come to this point in time that our MEs and our RCMP have to wear body-worn cameras, just not only for their own protection, but for that of the individuals that they are potentially arresting. And I fully support this. It's only $13,358. I don't think we need to quibble very much about the price of this.
Okay, Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Director. So with everything like this, I look at it from 3 different perspectives. The employee perspective, so CPOs, MEs, they're employees. They're covered by occupational health safety. We have insurance issues, workers' compensation. At some point in time, I think those organizations are going to say if you don't have body-worn cameras, you are going to be charged extra, simply because it is the absolute norm in that industry right now. The second is the protection of the town from frivolous lawsuits. Director Andrews has talked about that extensively, and I think that's an important thing to consider as an organization. The other one, too, is our citizens are going to be expecting the body cameras on our officers to protect them from the possibility of abuse from our officers. So we have to look at it from those 3 different perspectives, and all 3 perspectives are saying that this is a required thing moving forward. Price, whatever the price happens to be, we're not going to stop them from having the equipment that they need to do their jobs. Thank you.
Mayor Dole?
And I'll just bring up one more time that I could also, I totally support this as well, and I can also say that for the cost, we're going to get back, in my opinion, a lot more for being able to use this in court when we can't get an officer there. But thank you for sharing that information.
Okay, moving on to our next item. Oh, actually, before we do that, I do have a response for Councillor Cummings' question on our IT equipment donations. So we send it to the Electronics Recycling Association. We remove the hard drive, so no chance for data breaches. If the equipment is then deemed good enough, the association will refurbish it and gives it to schools, communities, and associations and volunteer groups. All right. All right, so moving on to our next item was the automated vehicle locating system for pickup trucks, and I have Director Pedro to present this.
All right, thank you very much. So we are looking to expand our current AVL system. The town in 2024 added 23 heavy equipment vehicles to the system, and what this essentially does, it allows us to track where these vehicles are, what routes they take, the hours, timing of everything. And so we're looking to expand that additional to an additional 27 pickup trucks in our fleet, and that would complete every vehicle that we do have for it. There is obviously an initial installation cost as well as annual fees attributable to adding those 27 units, which is the $7,000 in subsequent years. And I will happy to be answer any questions.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Linderman. I'm in full agreement with this as far as when it comes to misuse of our equipment, as well as maybe if there's a theft in the future or so forth. But also, I think it also contributes to our asset management program as far as you mentioned, Director Pedro, being able to track the hours and the use of those pieces of equipment so that preventive maintenance could be scheduled at a timely interval. So I'm in full agreement with this offer.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. Just is this a separate system altogether, or is it incorporated into one of our, like a module of a system that we already have engaged with the town?
No, it is completely separate, so it's a different GIS provider that handles that.
So I do remember in the news this year, the city of Toronto was in the news for this exact system, discovering an incredibly large number of violations of town policy or city policy in the use of their vehicles. Vehicles that had been found to be parked in malls for the entire shift, sort of thing. So I agree with Councillor Daly. It's a great way to understand the use of our vehicles, how we're using our vehicles, where we're using our vehicles, and probably finding some efficiencies in how to use it a little bit better. So I'm in full support of this program as well.
Councillor Wilson and then Bletz.
No, thank you. Just a question, I'm sure, Director, you've mentioned it before, but just remind me, is this real-time reporting, or is it a chip that is downloaded at the end of the day or an end of a shift or the end of the week? Thank you.
It is essentially real time. There is a very small data window where it transfers back to the system, but it is virtually real time.
Councillor Bletz?
Thank you, Director Linderman, and to Director Pedro. First of all, I just want to clarify, I don't really think we have to be concerned about any of our staff parking in a shopping mall in Olds, because I think they are probably the most watched employees we have in the entire municipality. But so going forward, then when we have the implementation of all of these vehicle locating, whatever you want to call them, then you would be able to provide us the efficiencies that. Will you be able to give us KPIs on what the efficiencies are, or is that something you're just going to eternally monitor and notice for future references? This is how we can improve, like our summer students driving around picking up people from mowers and such.
No, great question. Essentially, you hit the nail on the head. It would be used to provide those reports. We could generate any sort of. We can export any information that's in the system. We could also generate maps showing certain routes and trying to find efficiencies there. We would incorporate some of this data into citywide as well. There is capability, which we are currently working on at this point, of that equipment utilization piece. So it would all come together, hopefully seamlessly.
Thank you for that information, and then supplemental then going forward, perhaps when we have your quarterly updates and reports, maybe some of this information can be provided so that we can share it with our residents so that they realize that we are monitoring the situations and how efficient our staff is working and that type of information, because that's one of the things that we all tend to hear about as a counselor is that, you know, the green, what do they used to call it, the John Deere parade, when we used to have our mowers drive back and forth from places. So this way we might be able to provide better information that as to what our staff and where our staff are.
Absolutely, we can certainly do that.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, yeah, no, I don't, well, just question regarding, from the safety side, are you able to see vehicle speed, I don't know, vehicle stopping distance, that sort of thing?
Speed, yes. In terms of precision for stopping distance, that's fairly granular. So it's all GPS based. So I don't think we'd be able to tell that, you know, they're 5 feet behind another vehicle, for example. But
Okay. Moving on to our next item, we have contracted street sweeping, and again, Director Pedro will present this.
all right, this is tying into our service level discussion earlier regarding street sweeping. Council was in favor of continuing with our hybrid model between contracted street sweeping and utilization of our own sweeper. We have increased this amount by $5,000. So in 2024, it was $40,000. We are asking for $5,000. This should give us approximately another week of contracted services there. And so it seemed to work quite well. So we are looking at formalizing this on an annual basis.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you. And I think through the efficiency that we've seen in the past couple of years that we've used the contract street sweepers, I'm in full agreement with this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. Just one question, and that is, so going forward to 2026 and 2027, the price is the same. Are we entering a contract, a 3-year contract with this company that was doing it, or you don't anticipate any increase in price?
Great question. So we are looking at multi-year contracts for a number of our services going forward. We hadn't contemplated this one, but it is certainly something we can look into. In terms of the 3-year cost, I think that's going to be relatively close to what we need. There is flexibility in what we can do based on the hours that they come in, or if they bring in 2 sweepers like they did at times this year. So I think it does give us enough flexibility for the next 3 years.
Okay. Moving on to our next item is the sidewalk repairs and maintenance, and this is an increase to an existing budget. And again, Director Pedro.
All right. So we are asking for an additional $30,000 on top of our base sidewalk amount of $120,000. Reason being is there just have been inflationary increase to the cost of replacing concrete, and certainly our needs for sidewalks and ramps have not gone down. On page 2 of our report, we have identified our approximate inventory of 81 kilometers of sidewalk. We have approximately 192, or roughly 1.9 to 2 kilometers worth of deficiencies. That is quite a long list, and if we don't increase the amount that we're spending, that list will continue to grow. And so with the additional $30,000, we are hoping to do more than we've done in previous years. You can see an increase in a per meter price between 2022 and 2024, so it has gone up quite substantially. We estimate that with this $150,000, we can complete roughly 450 to 500 meters of sidewalk, linear meters of sidewalk, and so we are looking to hopefully implement that going forward. And as Councillor Ryan alluded to, this is one of the ones where we are looking at a 3-year contract. The biggest issue with these types of jobs is that they're relatively small for contractors, so they tend to get pushed to the later in the season. And so locking in that 3-year term gives us favorable scheduling as well as pricing. And so we'll be looking at that for sidewalks as well as asphalt going forward as well.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Linderman. Through you to Director Pedro, is that I understand the need in some circumstances to replace the sidewalk, and I've seen a lot of that happening this fall with the contractor here in town pulling out the old sidewalk, replace it with new concrete. And in light of the increase in the costs of materials as well as labor, and I know before you came on board here with the town of Olds, there was some investigation going on about the repair and maintenance of sidewalk, not replacing, but companies, engaging with companies that come in and lift sidewalks, grind sidewalks, repair cracks and so forth, rather than replacing the whole slab of concrete. Just wondering, is that part and parcel of this proposal to continue to look into that, or is this just the replacement of the concrete itself?
No, very good question. This would apply to all sort of repair and maintenance, so not just replacement. We do currently do those cuts as required. We don't do any slab jacking, as it's typically called, to raise sidewalks. That would be something we would consider depending on the need. The issue with raising concrete, which can be successful, and I've certainly done it lots in the past, is that the cost benefit may not be there, depending on the age of the actual concrete. So it's really a case-by-case situation for those. But it certainly would be considered.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. So we have here a number you've given us, which is our total amount of meters of deficient sidewalk. And we have a number which is the amount that we are proposing to repair in 2024. I'm assuming moving forward, relatively the same number. What's missing for me is the number of meters that are added to the deficiency list on a year-over-year basis, so that we have an idea that we're getting ahead rather than falling behind in the repair per year that we're doing. So do you have any idea? I know we haven't really been keeping good track of things in the past. You're doing a great job of that now with this inventory. Can you tell us how many meters on average are added to our deficiency list, and are we getting ahead, falling behind, or staying steady?
I don't have the exact number. We could certainly pull that for either later today or the next meeting. I will say anecdotally, the 120, when we first were contracting out and selecting our locations, seemed like it would roughly keep up with the needs. So I would estimate the additional 30 would help us chip away at the needs. The one thing that we don't do very well, and we are going to improve on, is actually inspecting all of our sidewalks. So historically what's been done is that they've been based on essentially complaints. So a complaint comes in, gets put on the list, and then it gets triaged and prioritized accordingly. That's not the greatest system for managing a sidewalk inventory. So there's work to be done there for sure. Once we get that process built and in place, I think we'll have a better understanding of what the needs are versus the actual costs.
Councillor Cummings?
Well, that's perfect. So for me, the best way to make the decision on how much we should budget for this sort of stuff and agree upon is knowing if we're going ahead, falling behind or anything like that. So that getting that information in the future is perfect. And I appreciate all the great effort you're doing in trying to get this inventory done for us. Thanks.
Okay, no other questions. We'll move on. Our next item is the land use bylaw update. And again, Director Pedro.
Here we go. So not to steal words from Director Andrews' mouth, but this is perhaps borderline our critical project sheet here. As Council has been aware, we are currently underway on our MDP and land use bylaw revision. Council did fund the first small portion of that in the 2024 budget. We are bringing it back for the remainder of that amount. And obviously, this is quite critical for us. There have been an excessive amount of land use bylaw amendments for things that should not be coming forward to council. Just this year alone, and we were looking at the numbers the other day, our planner has come to council 32 times for land use bylaw amendments. That's between the actual RFD and then the public hearings. So those 16 occurrences were for items that really should not have come to council. They should have been just approvable items within the land use bylaw. There were only 2 that were larger ASP amendments that should have come to council. And so obviously there has been many amendments over the years to our land use bylaw, so we're hoping to continue our progress on that with ISL engineering and get that completed hopefully prior to the election. I will also note that in this project sheet, we are including the addition of the permitting module within Citywide. And so that's roughly $80,000 of the $213,000. That's largely implementation. The biggest benefit to that program is that we have the potential to digitize all of our permitting and processes. So everything from development permits, planning applications, building permits as well. And also sort of a small addition to that module is that it will handle business licensing as well as special events permitting. So looking to integrate that all 100% digital. The customer portal also is quite nice there, so it gives everyone a login. They are able to see where their permit is at and then correspond with administration through the portal. And so it's fully digital, as well as integrating our online payments for that as well. So certainly just streamlining the entire process for us.
Meredith?
Just have a query. What is letter builder?
So that is an internal component where it would automatically generate letters that need to go out. So say for a development permit application, if there's a circulation that needs to go out, it will generate and actually send those out.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Director Linderman, and thank you, Director Pedro, for bringing this information forward. I can fully support this. I know how many times I've seen in the last 7 years the amendments we've had to the land use bylaw, and I think that any enhancements that we can make to both customer service, internal and external, I think is a win-win for the town. So I look forward to the implementation and the new land use bylaw coming forward.
Councillor Cummings?
Thanks. Just if administration could give us an idea, our land use bylaw being 23 years old, seems old for a bylaw of any nature. Do we have an idea of what the average age of a land use bylaw is in Alberta? I know it's a huge and sometimes contentious bylaw, and we've seen, especially in the news in the last couple of years, some pushback on land use bylaw amendments and changes from other communities in our area. 23 years to me is a ridiculously outdated document of any nature, even if it's continuously updated through amendments and whatnot. So I just want to get an idea of how out of the norm this is and what we can do in the future to protect ourselves from getting this far behind again in such a significant and fundamental bylaw of our town.
So I wouldn't know the specific average off the top of my head. I will speak from my experience. Generally, LUBs every 5 years, you want to look at them, just given the ever-changing nature of development and policies and techniques for various mechanisms. But generally, 5 to 7 years would be the max you want to go.
CEO?
Yeah, I'll add a bit too. Yeah, we don't know for sure how long the average period is of review. And 5 to 7 seems like a reasonable time. Even if you push that out to 10, sure. But a good rule of thumb is that if you're having significant amounts of statutory plans, like since this land use bylaw was last updated, we've had 2 area redevelopment plans and many ASPs, area structure plans, passed by council. Then you add I think we're over 350 amendments at least, maybe over 400 now since 2001. That should have a trigger that eventually you're tinkering away at it so much that things have changed. So, and that's also where you probably find lots of villages that have older bylaws, but since 2001, the town of Olds has probably increased about 30% in population, for instance, and so much more in assessment. So, and plus annexations and all the other things. The time is right. But also, I want to speak briefly to the permitting module, which kind of relates to, let's say, the AP module Sheena explained earlier. One thing that's tougher to explain or prove to council at times like this, when we talk about records management or digitization or trying to streamline approvals through electronic software, providing easier access through online portals, which both those projects touch. It even comes down to the staffing. Like, it's going to alleviate pressures on current staff, but you look at future projections. We used to have 2 development officers here not that long ago, just before COVID, a planner and 2 DOs. Now we just added a planner not even 2 years ago. It helps us delay that eventual need for, let's say, a second development officer or another finance clerk as well. If we're able to review our processes and find ways through, whether it be software or red tape reduction or something like that as well. So there is a benefit there, but again, going back to a comment I made earlier, it's whether council wants to invest in that benefit right now is the question at hand. But everything we're bringing you has a logic to it, but certainly if you think the time is now, perfect. If not, let us know. So.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, and in light of those comments, I guess my question or comments are useless right now, but I'll say them anyway. I'm not at the point where I fully support. I do certainly like the digitization and the citywide app. I shudder a bit at the cost. And again, I liken this to the I&I work that we're doing and a few other things where it's the proverbial, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you do it one bite at a time, right? And this is to the CEO's just comments here around, do we try and do all this essentially in the next 9, 10, 11 months, I think is what we're doing before this term ends. Or can we phase this a bit? And that was the word, exact word I wrote down. Can we phase this, spread this out, salami slice it a bit in terms of what we're doing and spending the dollars, maybe instead of 213 next year, chunk it up a bit. But I certainly do like the citywide app and the advantages that would bring. But I am certainly a little leery of the cost commitment.
So if we did want to address the cost, we would pull out the permitting side of things, which, as mentioned, it was around 80, I believe it was 87, closer to there. I would hesitate to remove the remaining work on the land use bylaw, however. So certainly have options, but.
Supplemental?
No, I was hoping you'd go the other way and say, let's focus on the citywide and delay and defer and nibble away at the bylaw side. But thank you for that comment. And this will be one of the few things here that I'll marinate on over the next couple of days, so thank you.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. So I'm all for the land use bylaw update. It's such a fundamental building block of our community that it needs to be stable and it needs to be well presented and up to date. So the question I have is more from an administrative perspective on preventing this delay or mess. And the CAO brought up a couple of really good trigger points that could happen to tell us that this is time to do that. The number of amendments, the development of our community in size and scope, the area structure plans, and all these other things that are happening. And I'm wondering if it's possible that we could develop a policy that would trigger a land use bylaw update, rather than relying, as we have in the past, of just simply saying at some point, yeah, we need to do it 23 years later. As everybody knows, I'm a big fan of creating a policy, and that's, everything needs a policy, because we are policymakers as governance. So if we can create a governance model to ensure that we don't have another 23-year gap in our development structure, I think that that's a great way forward. I'm not asking you to do it today. I'm just asking to keep it in mind that that's something that we should be thinking of as a governance team, is to make sure that we protect our future selves from this sort of delay and mess.
CAO?
Yeah, and the short answer is yes. Council can build directly into the bylaw or have a policy or a guidance that, every 5 years there is some type of review done. Generally, they will be cheaper than, $150,000 if you're doing them more regularly as well. So there's credence to that. Apart from the land use bylaw, and it's important to note too that we have very important master servicing plans too. We have stormwater, we have sanitary, we have water, and we have, should have transportation as well, that connect into our offsite levy bylaw. Those plans are all, except for the stormwater, over 10 years old. So within the next 4 years, when we update our offsite levy bylaw, which is a very, I would say, liability-prone activity, once you get into development, we have to spend upwards of six figures, $100,000, on each of those plans to get them updated as well, because we don't have what you're talking about, that recurring time frame or trigger point when we do update them. So it's duly noted, something it's on our radar for sure, and the land use bylaw is the largest, but certainly not the only one we have to get better on incorporating into our planning regimes.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Director Linderman, and I just want to make a comment here. This was actually discussed in the last term. While we were reviewing our municipal development plan, we were looking at the land use development plan, or as bylaw as well. And I think that needs to be noted, that it wasn't due to lack of trying, and then COVID hit, and then it was an election and staffing changes also occurred. So I do agree that maybe perhaps we need to build it into our overall or overarching policy review or bylaw review, or build it into the bylaw, that we will review this once every term of the new council.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. I just want to build on that, I guess, and say that I agree that we need to build in something. I'm not sure we need a policy, but I think it could just be put in the bylaw, because bylaws shall be reviewed every 5 years. Whatever it takes, every 4 years, whatever you think is best, CEO. I do have a question on the permitting side now that Director Pedro has suggested about taking out the 87K. And we could do this in 2 stages of doing the land use bylaw update, which I think is imperative. It's well overdue, and it's a necessary thing. I think it needs to be done. But perhaps we can lessen the blow a little bit by taking the 87K and doing that in 2026 and moving the permitting stage forward another year, just to lessen the blow on the budget. I'd like to see what CEO thought about that, and what the triggering point is for the pressures, because we just saw in the housing at the very beginning of our discussion here today. I would imagine that would have taken some type of permitting and planning resources to do that, and so you would be able to have a better idea operationally whether or not you can balance what we have and what was coming up for 2026, you see, and whether or not we really need this portion of it, the permitting side of this particular ask. and what the triggering point would be for whether or not we'd have to hire another planner. If this could put off hiring another planner, then it would all balance out, I guess. So I'm going to leave that in your capable hands to figure out that.
Yeah, and fair question, because that directly relates to my words earlier. Now, I think, bring it up a notch, like the word need, I think everything we're presenting to council is a need outside of a want, but just like people have to make those hard decisions at their homes right now, not every need can be fulfilled. So the permitting module, I think, is a need for a lot of reasons. Now, is it a absolute need this year? No. But the consequences, like we are chasing growth, and your housing starts that I presented at the start of this meeting does show that. So if council, for example, expects our development permits to be processed within a reasonable time frame, and they are right now, if we see the growth that we were expecting, 2024 in addition into 2025 accelerating, it's going to be too much for our current staff load. But it's a what if right now. So I can't say, if we don't do this, there shall be fires and brimstone. No, it's not that. It's that growth has consequences, obviously with our infrastructure, with our policing, with our bylaw, but also with our administrative staff too. So we have to be cognizant of that. And that's what, if I had to give you one reason why we're bringing forward this permitting module, it's to preempt some of that by streamlining a lot of the busy work that we do. So.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Director. Just my brief comment, and the CEOs started to address that along with Director Pedro's earlier comments. And I'm certainly not going to challenge you, but as the expert, but I've said I was hoping you would indicate that the citywide app is the where we would spend the dollars, and we could stretch out the bylaw review over a year and a half or 2 years, recognizing that we're trying to write, if not 23 years of quietness, at least something a little bit more or a little bit less. But from an end user perspective, the customer, whoever that would be, the residents, developers, investors, what's likely to have a bigger impact to them? I know Jason Nixon's talked about removing bureaucracy around approvals and housing and streamlining the process, which we've talked about. What's an end user going to see the biggest benefit from? The bylaw study review and completing that in the shortest time possible, or the citywide app?
Fair question. You won't like my answer on this one either. It's certainly the land use bylaw. So the number of inefficiencies, inconsistencies, conflicting sections, and in there is tough to deal with. So when we're talking increased development, when applicants need to review our documents and they're not necessarily speaking well together, depending on the sections you're looking at, I think it creates a lot of headaches. The permitting side, it's a nice to have to make everything more efficient, but if you don't have that statutory plan behind it to make things clear, then it presents many more challenges.
I'll add to that too, that this process, which is partially underway with the MDP side, there is a robust public engagement element as well. So those people who may have more of an interest or perhaps more of a problem with their current picket rezoning, area restructure plan, et cetera, they will have the opportunity to engage and to speak at open houses, and their responses collected. So there is that also opportunity for direct impact, if you want to use your words.
I would like to just remind council that we are considering taking a recess from 12 o'clock on to do our webinar with Alberta municipalities. So would you prefer to take a recess and then come back for 2 items, or do you feel that we can quickly go through the next 2 items? Okay? I think we should just move forward to the next item then, if everyone is good with that. Well, okay. And my comment I was going to say was I really believe in project timelines, and I would feel that it's important to move forward for the sake of administration.
Okay, Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, and thank you for that comment and the opportunity to speak, Mayor Dahl. I just want to point out to many of us sitting around this table that at the last election platform, many individuals and many of my colleagues campaigned on transparency. And this is one of the tools that will give not only our administration, but our planning department that tool to be transparent and efficient. And to phase this over a couple of years, I think it just kicks the can down the road. And I really believe that, with the integration of the payment provider on online service, and I've heard that many times over the years, people want that accessibility and that availability. I think that we need to move forward with this project as it is written and move on to the next items, and I concur with Mayor Dahl. Thank you.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Director Lindeman, and I would concur with what Councillor Blatz has said, and also referring back to CAO's comment that there's been 300 or 400 amendments to our land use bylaw at this point, and in my view, that how legitimate is our land use bylaw anymore, or how effective is it if we've got that many amendments that are already in it? And so I would agree that we move forward with this project. And, it all comes down to you can pay this price today or you can pay that price tomorrow. It's not going to get any cheaper. And I think this is a necessity if we're looking at our red tape reduction and our efficiency and in our investors and our developers that come into this town, that it's not a wishy-washy decision-making process that's going to happen. We have something that is strong and reliable. So I would agree to move forward with this.
Councillor Cummings?
Just one last quick comment there about the entire statutory plan process. So we are working on the municipal development plan, the land use bylaws in front of us here today. The CAO Williams talked about the service plans for transportation, sewer, water, and such. At the very end of that, we've asked administration to start a review of the area redevelopment plan for East Olds, which in my mind, and I think in administration's mind, requires this work to be done first, because it has to rely on the land use bylaw. It has to rely on the structure or the MDP. So I think that if we want to have a robust planning process in the community, we have to do this, then we have to do the next step, we have to do the next step, and then we start wash and repeat the same process over and over and over again. It's a continuous activity municipalities have to do all the time, and we can't just skip it and skip it and skip it and skip it, because we're skipping one thing today, we're skipping the 10 other things that are needed to be done after that thing is done. So a good policy, whether it's an individual policy or if we build it into the bylaws, however it's done, we have to ensure that we continuously do this process over and over again.
Okay, so moving on, next we have our trails, repairs and maintenance, and again, Director Pedro.
Okay, thank you. So this does tie in somewhat with our capital request for the additional pathways. We, in 2024, we were fortunate enough to have $40,000 to replace about 80 meters of our existing pathway system. We are looking to formalize an annual amount to address those deficiencies. We have quite a robust pathway network. There has been little maintenance done on them, whether it be preventative maintenance like crack sealing or patchwork, and little large section replacement as is needed. So we are seeing the effects of that now. The danger if we don't do that type of work, the infrastructure will get worse and it will be more costly to repair down the road. So we are looking at adding $40,000 on an annual basis to try and address those issues and hopefully extend the life of the infrastructure there.
Okay, seeing no questions, our next item is under utilities supported item, and it is an increase to an existing budget of the catch basin repairs and replacement, and again, Director Pedro.
Okay, so similar to the last narrative, we have quite a few catch basins in town, many of which need some repair. So whether it's settlement or cracking or covers that need to be replaced. And so in order to address that need, we are asking for an annual amount, $45,000 to do so. We did perform work this year on that program, and it did prove quite successful. Going forward, if we do have failing catch basins, it of course affects our entire stormwater management in the area, so it is an important part of our infrastructure.
Councillor Cummings?
Yeah, I want to say kudos on these last two project sheets. I know council's been asking for quite some time to have a consistent and regular expected funding for repair and maintenance of these capital projects or capital work. As we assume the responsibility of more and more kilometers of road, we increase the number of catch basins. Development is being done in the town, and we are expecting to take on more kilometers of road in the near future. I would actually like to see something like this with an increasing amount each year as we anticipate more and more upcoming repairs as our infrastructure gets older and whatnot. I know you've done a great job in providing us with the sidewalk numbers on what is deficient, what needs to be repaired, and the cost of those repairs moving forward. And I love this work is being done, and I wish we can continue with this process of long-term financial planning for repair and maintenance.
Thank you. I believe this was a great discussion we had with our CAO on day one, which was just a couple days ago or yesterday, I believe. We had great conversation in this on Monday. So it's come time that we are ending, and I would like to just say around the table that I appreciate everybody's time, all the staff time, and thank you from the Albertan for being here for us as well. And I adjourn the meeting, please, at 12. Yes, sorry. Yes, I will. I would entertain a motion for accepting for information. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we accept consideration for the 2025 operating and capital budgets as information.
Thank you. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? And I look forward to seeing everyone in next week, I believe. Thank you. I adjourn the meeting at 12:06 p.m. Thank you once again.